Welcome back to 7th Grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about predictive programming. The Tavistock Institute of Human Relations is a British non-profit research and consulting organization specializing in the study of group behavior. There are sister organizations in China and Germany. When you dig deep into the history of this organization and you begin to read the documents about their formation, you start to hear strange terms, one of which is the Aquarian Conspiracy. That is how they refer to themselves, referring to a super-secret 1974 Stanford Research Institute study entitled Changing Images of Man. This book can be considered an essential primer on mind control and brainwashing combat techniques. Over more than 50 years, tens of billions of dollars have been allocated by the government of the United States with the plan of helping these think tanks and foundations that are aligned with the Tavistock Institute to fund the work and research into population manipulation and control. Every aspect of the mental and psychological life of people on this planet was profiled, recorded, and stored in databases. When you look into the work of these social scientists, psychologists, these psychiatrists, anthropologists that work for these think tanks and these foundations, it tends to form this group of very powerful people that belong to various oligarchies. It is comprised of mostly old Venetian black nobility family members, or people who work for the black nobility. You might ask yourself, what is the purpose of these behavior modifications? It is to bring about forced changes into our ways of life without our agreement and without ever realizing what is happening to us. The ultimate goal being complete control of mankind's inner sense of identity and tearing down mankind's innermost soul and the placement in the vacant space of an artificial, synthetic pseudo-soul. So this begins to echo some of the things that you see taking shape right now with digital money and artificial intelligence. But when you dig deeper into the work of some of these psychiatrists and sociologists and these anthropologists, you find the work of a Professor John McMurtry, who wrote in his 2001 opening address at the Science for Peace Forum held at the University of Toronto. He said, "Totality of rule is not the only parameter of totalitarianism. Unlimited power also proceeds from omnipresent centers. In the new totalitarian movement, this omnipresent directive force communicates through behavior modification and identity change, the dominant nodes of the interlocked system. Psychological terror is not the essence, but the punctuation mark of the new totalitarianism meaning. The money and consumption command channel is the secret of the movement's success because it avoids responsibility for its failures. Wall Street prescribed market failures to provide for societies that are instead always attributed to transcendental forces of the invisible hand, punishing these societies for alleged sins against market laws."
Hey, back it up. What did you say about identity swap or identity change? I was trying to hear what you said. I missed it. There's like 3 lines, 4 lines back.
The plan is to replace man's soul, take that out, and in that empty space, you're going to place an artificial synthetic pseudo-soul.
Yeah, I got that. But nah, it's the other one when they talk about identity. It says something really deep there.
So the ultimate goal is complete extraction of man's inner sense of identity, tearing out mankind's innermost soul.
Oh, no, you're going too deep. I was talking about the one where it's talking about changing identity, as in Native Americans become Negro, they've done this shit over and over. And this is something else that we've talked about on past podcasts was whenever they had to deal with mind control, remember Blumenbach, remember when the slaves in South Carolina were tripping and they go all the way to Germany for this guy named Blumenbach. How come they always go to Germany? The other one, they have a history of this shit. And the most important one is we always talk about Werner von Braun because he was the head of NASA. He was given NASA. NASA is an intelligence agency. It's not a science agency. So all these things are saying the same thing, and we're seeing them come to fruition all the time. We just don't. If you had an organization called the Mind Wipe Organization, it wouldn't work. But if you have an organization called NASA, it's going to work because you're going to implement those things. You want to be the first adopter of different shit. to breaking down is deep as hell, because what they're saying, not only are we erasing your soul or pulling it out, we're going to stick something else in there in its place. And there's certain words we can't say, but that sounds a lot like a nanotechnology that was inside of a needle one time. These things that we're talking about, they're all related. And this is something that we talk about off the air all the time, is that there's so many things related that people don't see it that way. But when they're talking about removing your soul, they have a plan for doing that and replacing it with something else. And what's even deeper, when he said that they blame the problems of the market on the market, Wall Street blames the market. So they never have to have any accountability for fucking people over. Yeah, man, come on. Keep going, cuz.
One thing that they found is that to get these messages to us, manipulate us, use the fireside that we sit up at every night. The fireside has been replaced by electronic stimulation through television. First it was radio, then it was television, now it's through the phones, devices people carry around on their bodies all day long.
That's deep, because that's like an individual fireside. When we were kids, we had dinner at the same time. And I remember Charlie Brown would come on or something special, and my mom would put paper on the floor and let me eat in front of the TV. But that fireside, it was something that was consensus. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like it was like we're all doing this and we all agree on whatever is on the screen or whatever is going through the shit. So, but now we have your phone can customize a message directly to you. We all talk about algorithm. We all talk about, hey man, I was just talking about this commercial and blah 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 popped up on the phone. That shit. So that algorithm can customize this message to you to get a desired effect.
Techniques for psychological manipulation of society are about as old as humanity itself. Feudal lords, to preserve and consolidate their power forever, had used punishment and torture as dissuasive agents of change. Even thousands of years ago, it was not the technique per se, but the conscious application as divide and conquer tools, which aided ruling classes. No matter how anti-human a particular technique or therapeutic approach may be, it is not itself in counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency cannot proceed merely on horrors. It requires conscious and systematic application by ruling classes or its dupes. This was achieved by fusing psychology and psychiatry in the 1930s. The first massive application of psychology as a conscious weapon took place in Nazi Germany, especially in reference to eugenics, which played upon the most backward Aryan illusions held by and imposed on portions of the masses. While the cause and development of Nazi butchery stem wholly from world economic collapse, its specific form, eugenics, was devised by the Nazis' favorite mathematicians and theoretic geneticists. They are psychiatrists. Since then, the science of the mind had been converted into its craft of mind destruction. Legitimate therapeutic approaches have given way to behavior-modifying pseudoscience in the name of aversion therapy. Now, what I will add at this point is that they didn't really get it from the Nazis. The Nazis weren't the ones that came up with eugenics. It was in America where eugenics were actually first started and put into play. Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger belonged to a group of people, one of which worshipped the teachings of Darwin, who was an occultist, by the way. And that is also another reoccurring theme with all of these people is occult practices.
Oh, girl. So, oh boy, I forgot his name. But when he started the shit, he admitted that we would not ever get to our goals by doing, I forgot the term he used, but he said we would get there by planning. Hence, why Miss Singer's organization was called Planned Parenthood. Planning was a word they would use instead of eugenics, because eugenics was too... People knew about eugenics. They got that shit. But when you start using other words, planning was one of the words they used. That's why it's called Planned Parenthood. And people want to argue with you about her past or whatever. Ain't nothing to argue about.
So a lot of this is beset by reason and this concept of using reason. The age of reason. Francis Bacon. That's all Masonic. Masons, their foundation of their belief system, of their morals and dogma is based upon reason. Whenever you hear a man of reason, when you hear that, see, it sounds logical. It sounds like somebody that you can talk to that is like, have a sound mind. Yes. because that person is free and accepted, and they belong to a certain mentality that controls the narrative, that controls science, that goes all the way back to John Dee, who was the court sorcerer and confidant of Elizabeth I.
When somebody hits you with that, it's almost like they're negotiating. They're going to convince you of something. It puts you at ease. Oh, this person is logical, or this is a man of reason. No, those are terms. Look, just because you name somebody something doesn't mean they're that. If you name this little nerdy motherfucker Michael Jordan, doesn't mean he can play basketball. But it's the same thing with this. Just because you call that person a man of reason, just because you say this is logical, it puts you at ease where you start listening to him, not realizing it's almost a form of hypnotism. Excuse me, and they lull you to sleep with this bullshit, and you don't realize that they don't have any more knowledge than you do, or half the shit don't. It's not even. There's no proof to the shit, but you think your opinion has less value because this motherfucker has a title, or because, and that's the problem with this whole the Masonic secret society shit. You think they might have some information you really need, so you sit there and okay, I'm listening. Oh, that's deep. No, it's not. They got different levels. Everybody don't know everything, that motherfucker. But they convince you of that shit, and they rob you of your logic.
The religious and mystical dimensions to the story of Tavistock are central to any study of the U.S. government after World War II and what they were interested in regarding their focus in psychology and parapsychology and how it could benefit intelligence agencies. It was the Tavistock Institute and a cabal of scientists who were the first to bring the potential uses of paranormal abilities into the military and its applications, as well as the first in developing chemical substances that could stimulate psychic abilities. This group included men such as Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, head of the CIA's Technical Services Staff, with shadowy connections both to Operation Paperclip and MK Ultra and the Kennedy assassination.
But that was the whole point of the CIA. They was on mind control from day one.
The first director of the CIA used to attend seances with his girlfriend in upstate New York. So, again, I keep telling you that these people have occult leanings, but I'll keep going further into it. All these people were connected to JFK's in some way, or the assassin Lee Harvey Oswald. They were all talking to ghosts, practicing ritual magic, holding hands around the seance table, or sacrificing chickens in New Orleans apartments. Lee Harvey Oswald, Alan Dulles, the head of the CIA, David Ferry, all these people had some occult connection, connected to America's ruling elite and the wealthiest, best connected families in the country. The CIA was not the first organization to confront the task of probing the human mind. Operations Bluebird, Artichoke, which we're hearing about now, which has finally been declassified by Tulsi Gabbard, and MK Ultra were designed to respond to similar practices of the Soviet Union and China.
You left one out. Most recently, one of the things that this BB individual asked them to remove from the Kennedy was there were several Mossad agents involved in the Kennedy assassination. I'm trying to say, I don't know. I don't want to get banned because we say the wrong shit.
Just say it. Too hard. I don't give a shit.
Okay, cool, done. Hey, so one of the requests BB had of Trump recently was to remove all effects of Israelis involved in the Kennedy killing. There's at least 7. I don't want to lie. I think it's 7 different people that were involved, that were Mossad or whatever agents involved in the Kennedy assassination. It's all due because was it AIPAC? He wanted them to declare themselves as a foreign party. That's what got him killed. That's what because they were involved. And don't get me wrong, his vice president was involved too. But that's the biggest thing, is that they wanted the Israeli names taken out of the dossier regarding the Kennedy assassination. That's mind control right there. You sitting here and changing history, removing people that you know were involved. Yeah. The fact that you think you can do that shit. But yes, there are several people involved that they wanted to remove, or he wanted to remove recently. Excuse me.
Intelligence officers and occult leaders have a lot in common. Secrecy is a way of life for both a spy and a sorcerer. They both use codes and code names. They pretend to have access to mysteries not available in general public. They both claim to be able to influence events at a distance with their special abilities and powers. They both specialize in manipulation of reality. Both are aware that things are not always what they seem to be, that they are both ruthless and often immoral in the pursuit of their goals. And when one can easily manipulate the perception of reality, one eventually comes to the realization that truth itself is malleable. So it was only natural that the cultist and the spy would gravitate toward each other and would try to learn from each other. Dude, there you go. There it is.
The cultist and the spy go together. You know what I'm saying?
The control of reality and the perception of reality and the creation of consensus reality is a powerful political tool and has been since ancient times, when sorcerers could appear to create solar eclipses simply by knowing when one would occur and act accordingly. To control and manipulate the reality of the masses, one uses what is known as psychological warfare, and it is what has been one step from controlling a person's perception of reality to getting that person to act on it.
One of the things we talked about off the air was the Bible is in the wrong order. By placing the Bible in the wrong order, you look up to the wrong people. That's all I'm saying. If you put it in its correct order, it would have a completely different meaning. And this is all about pre-programming. This is what it is. You start hearing it at an early age. You start hearing stuff in grade school. You start everything from you can't mess with those people. That's anti-whatever. Or you can't mess with it. So that conditions you to put people on a pedestal who don't belong there. And when they sit there and tell you the spy and the sorcerer are hand in hand, which came first? You know what I'm saying? It'll make you think differently about things. So, yeah, this dogmatic attitude and stuff from these secret societies are all about controlling people and brainwashing people. And sometimes it's quite simple. You don't realize you've been brainwashed. And so you don't even realize that your behavior is altered or that you're falling for the banana in the tailpipe, as we say. But, yeah, man.
The CIA and Tavistock were toying with the black box of consciousness for decades. The techniques included drugs, various forms of hypnosis, and even more extreme measures such as those developed by Dr. Ewan Cameron in Montreal, who was a real piece of shit because he had procedures known as psychic driving, which involves drastic sensory deprivation sessions in an effort to wipe the consciousness clean and record a new consciousness over the old.
Over top of it, yep.
Much the same way we would record over a used cassette tape.
What was the Unabomber's name? I can't.
Kaczynski.
Kaczynski. You do know Kaczynski. When he was in college, he applied for. Well, he didn't apply. He was picked by the CIA, and he was in one of their mind control experiments. Mm-hmm. And so all those years later, it affected him where he's like, "Yeah, I don't ever want to deal with this again." And he got caught by that sandwich. His brother saw the order or whatever. He ordered some kind of sandwich, and his brother recognized it. That's how he got turned. His brother turned him in, but it wasn't what you think it was. It wasn't some kind of great, investigation. But if you read that guy's manifest, I kind of agree with it. Too much technology, too much mind control. People are being affected. So clearly, this is something they've been doing, actively doing. It's not like it was like, oh, we got one or two experiments. No. They were actively messing people up and didn't care about the people in the wake. They didn't care about, like in St. Louis, when they sprayed all that shit in the sky and people got sick. First, they did it with like military
Operation Sea Spray in San Diego.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's another one. I thought was that okay? I thought I got it backwards. Then I think St. Louis was when they did the military cats
and Sea Spray. School.
Yeah, and Sea Spray in San Diego is when they just did regular people. And they just wanted to see how many people will get sick and report it. They don't even have a point to it. they see people as expendable. They've had these attitudes for years, and then that'll make you go crazy. That's a form that is a form of mind control. When you sit here and have somebody question their own reality, we had it happen in 2019. Go ahead.
Operation Mockingbird is real. The complexity of human experience is such that we only wonder what trigger mechanisms exist in the environment, on television, in newspapers, and magazines, and even the internet, that suggest modes of behavior to these victims that are dangerous to themselves and to us. It would be only a matter of time before the mind control researchers began to scour the records of occultists, magicians, witches, voodoo priests, and Siberian shamans to isolate techniques that were used since time immemorial to supplant a person's normal, comfortable, everyday consciousness and replace it with a powerful, all-knowing, and sometimes violent, and always deceptive alter personality, and to use those alters to uncover the action of deep memory. For MKUltra, it was at its core an assault on the land of memory, the creation of a new false memory, and eradication of old dangerous ones. We saw this in cartoons. Wolverine was straight up MKUltra. They put false memories into his mind.
So I was about to say, they put so many false memories that the only one who knew the truth was Professor X. And there's a comic series.
The Silver Fox also knew.
No, all his memories, because they were. You got to remember, so much of his shit had to do with Japan, everything, and all this other.
Being an assassin.
Yeah. So the other thing was, what happened was his memories all came back at one time. That's the crazy part. I'm a nerd. Sorry, forgive me. I have that issue. But yeah, there's a couple issues where all his memory came back at once, and the first thing he did was go to Matterport and go after some people. You know what I'm saying? Because he couldn't remember. But when it comes back, he knew everything from Morocco, everything, all that shit. So yeah, nerd.
Magic was there when MKUltra began its search for the secrets of the paranormal and interviewed witches and wizards in America and all over the world. Ceremonial magic begins with the basic premise that it's sometimes formulated as the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, a simple phrase with ominous implications. Magicians believe that connections or links exist between perceived phenomena, and that to operate on one side of the link is to cause change to occur on the other. The magicians operate in the world of non-locality, a world where the force may be an object, a wave may be a particle, and everything is in the immediate communication with everything else. There was a term, a phrase in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Bruce Lee said, "The localized mind will work against you. Work to delocalize your mind." This part right here resonates with that. Magicians operate in the world of non-locality, a world where the force may be an object, a wave may be a particle, and everything is in immediate communication with everything else. Break that down. The force may be an object, a wave may be a particle. This is talking about spooky action at a distance. Spooky action at a distance. Einstein talked about that. This is what you and I talk about. This is what Bob Lazar was talking about with how that spacecraft worked. It didn't fly through space. It pulled space to it.
Yeah. It was some gravity type shit, yeah. Bob Lazar, I know what you're talking about. Come on with it.
The magician pulls strings, surrounded by an aura of deniability, an aura created by Newtonian science. Since science states that what the magician does is impossible, the result of superstition and ignorance. There is no such thing as the mafia. That's what J. Edgar Hoover said. And all the mafia capos laughed. Mind control and magic, not very far apart at all.
Yeah, Hoover was in on it. Yeah, that motherfucker's fucked up.
The magician is at once an interrogator and the interrogatee. He is the one in charge of manipulating and controlling the environment, but not for the effect it will have on someone else, but on him alone. What the CIA has done in its interrogation manual itself is a product of MKUltra. It's to separate the magician from the ultimate goal of all occultism, which is the kind of spiritual perfection and elevated consciousness, and instead focus all powers on occult techniques on an unwilling and uninformed subject, to manipulate him as well as the environment, to change the subject and transform him into something more useful to the interrogators and of mortal danger to the subject's own people. It is the jargon of occultism, black magic, and black magic in the service of the state. Hello, That is what we're talking about here. Now, predictive programming was used by Alan Watt, not to be confused with Alan Watts. Predictive programming is the theory that ideas, situations, and new technologies are carefully written into movies, TV shows, and books to groom the general population into accepting societal changes. Examples include the pilot episode of The Lone Gunman, which was a spin-off from The X-Files. Had those three incel goofy motherfuckers, and they were investigating a hijacked plane that was being flown into the World Trade Center as a false flag attack. The Batman movie, the sequel to Batman Begins, was The Dark Knight Rises, which featured a map of Gotham where one of the marked locations is Sandy Hook. You know what happened there?
Yep.
And an episode of The Family Guy in which Peter Griffin drives through the Boston Marathon, released only a few months before the bombing at the 2013 Boston Marathon. The 2011 movie Contagion, released years before the pandemic. The film depicted the global virus outbreak with scenes mirroring real-life world responses like mask mandates, social distancing, and vaccine development. And The Hunger Games, scenes as predictive of societal control, surveillance, and youth-led resistance movements. Think tanks like the Tavistock Institute are notorious for their culture creation of pseudo-environments, so the concept of precision signaling propaganda may not be so outlandish after all. Saddam Hussein, bin Laden, and other dictators installed by intelligence agencies ready to play their part for the banker-sponsored war machine. Mao Zedong is another example. He was groomed by Jesuit priests before he took control of China. There were Jesuit priests that were in the area afterwards that monitored the situation and provided covert assistance to Mao Zedong. People often cite Father Laszlo Ladny as one of those Jesuit priests who lived in Hong Kong from 1949 until his death in 1990. He settled in Hong Kong and began publishing China News Analysis in 1953, a highly influential newsletter that provided rare insights into Chinese politics during a time when information from mainland China was largely inaccessible to the West. Spy, that's what that is right there. You got to read between the lines. Tavistock understood through their extensive engagement in group work that manipulation, based upon bourgeois conceptions of the outside world as magical, was fundamental to mass control. In other words, the Institute looked for methods by which to manage populations by exploiting their ideology, by first creating numerous social groups, and then setting such groups into competition and making all gains based on winning these battles at the expense of the groups involved. A self-policing fascist social order could be established. It was a way to atomize the subject population, employing a method of sociological and psychiatric weaponry to the effect of dividing the people against themselves, setting race against race, language group against language group, women's self-interest against men as oppressors, and further subdividing them by professional category and so on, to basically further subdivide them into smaller territorial community self-interest groups that the military forces are never confronted with, and by the hardcore resistance provide a combination of sociological and psychiatric weapons of control. One of the ways in which these practices were encouraged and used by Tavistock brainwashers involved increasing levels of productivity and the intensification of labor at the expense of one's health. In other words, Rockefeller induced self-motivated destruction of the self, a society of brainwashed zombies, happy to subsist on the brink of starvation. All of it is based on a sort of perverse, subconscious Dionysus worship, fanaticism, within the broader framework of Rockefeller's model of the fascist society. The purpose is to function under a spiraling reduction in standard income and working conditions. There is a method to this madness, however. For example, in an environment of downward spiraling standard income and working conditions, higher and higher productivity is suggested as the group's goal. often at the expense of safety and the physiological well-being of group members. So I'm hearing from a lot of people who use AI how it was sold to them as being more and more productive and increasing productivity. What people are saying is that they're getting less sleep because they're taking on more and more work. So this plays right into this. Anyone who protests these conditions, they are told they are maladjusted. The idea was to recreate a family dynamic or a dynamic of peer pressure in group therapy, where predetermined objectives were forced onto the group through consensus or democracy, in the language of these social engineers. The idea was that by attacking someone's sovereign identity in the group, the individual would forfeit their sovereignty to the group and become suggestible to the predetermined objectives. Such techniques play upon the vulnerable person's guilt, shame, and regret with both sledgehammer and scalpel. Humiliated by the group, with only the unreal realm to judge from, the individual further degrades himself and accepts the verdict. He begins producing more. This is the malicious, disgusting kernel of co-participation, quality of life, co-determination, humanization, human relations, or whatever euphemism may be mustered, all under the banner of post-industrial society, a Ford Foundation-sponsored piece of garbage whose particular point as counterinsurgency weapon of ideology introduced by the proto-fascist notion of zero growth. Consider this: the slave labor death camp system of the Nazis are not the ideas of Hitler and his cronies, but an intrinsic expression of the fundamental policies of any zero growth economy. These programs came long before Tavistock was established. John D. Rockefeller began to push the human relations plans as the best way to get more productivity in 1916 when he spoke at the YMCA Industrial Conference, and then again in 1917 during his speech at Cornell University. One of the key proposals coming from the Rockefeller camp was to push a democratic employee stock ownership plan, because it makes the worker a capitalist in his views and then renders him a conservative and immune from radical ideas. The 1940s was a turning point for the Rockefeller strategy of behavior modification brainwashing, co-determination, co-participation, corporatism for the takeover of the United States and the world labor movement. As war wound down, Rockefeller changed the psychology of workers in ways essential to the way he would rule the U.S. organized labor movement from then on. This was done simultaneously on several levels. In 1946, Tavistock and Rockefeller was formalized in the Rockefeller Memorandum, in which Brigadier General John Rawlings Rees exposed the full depth of his cabal and offered it to the family. The Rockefeller Foundation, which had been heavily funding Tavistock and Tavistock members since 1934, readily accepted, and the Tavistock Clinic was transformed into Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. The Institute developed national and international operations under the heading of Operation Research. First, Rockefeller took many of the social scientists who had been involved in the fascist war intelligence services and set them upon the campuses in labor institutes funded by Rockefeller Foundation, National Institute of Mental Health, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and large capitalist money. These labor institutes were created at the same time as the CIA Joint Chiefs of Staff and the National Security Council as part of the same network that the Rockefeller was building to rule the world, once the United States had replaced Britain after the war as the world's strongest power. One of the key Tavistock projects was Rockefeller-sponsored Labor Institute, where behavior modification, intergroup motivation, team working, social dynamics, productivity increasing were all studied from psychological points of view of how to make them work to manipulate the great unwashed. By the early 1950s, Rockefeller had a network of labor institutes plus control of the Department of Labor to physically and psychologically control them from the top down of the United States labor movement. But Rockefeller's greatest contribution to the labor cause has been the complete destruction of the labor movement, its perversion and control through Rockefeller-Tavistock orchestrated operations, from the Civilian Conservation Corps to Works Progress Administration, the National Civic Federation, and American Federation of Labor. Labor movements in the United States were always firmly under the control of Rockefeller financial interests. For example, Sam Gompers, the AFL's first president, helped form in the early 1900s the National Civic Federation. It believed in the supremacy of employers and the benevolence of capitalism and helped break strikes, recruit vigilantes, and conduct attacks against the working class. The techniques used in labor negotiations in Spain, France, Germany, and the United States and other Western countries came straight out of the Tavistock's role-playing manual. It would do labor leaders some good to study Rockefeller's and the Tavistock techniques for labor negotiations, or perhaps with a wink and a nod, they already do. First, even before a strike, a union is thoroughly surveyed. Rockefeller Labor Institutes do psychological profiles of the union as a whole, collecting information on it through students who are sent out with questionnaires, by counseling done on union members, by intensive questioning of union leaders, by attending set-up discussion sessions of union members and attending meetings, by evaluating the union's past history, such as its tendency to strike, for example, and by going over written tests and records of personal histories of a significant number of individual members. Studies are done on racial and ethnic subsections of the union. For every subsection, such as Italians, for example, it is recorded whether they are from middle income, lower working class, newly immigrated, perhaps without citizen papers, deeply religious for a long time from a certain neighborhood, and very attached to one's mother, or so forth. Then the union and subsections are evaluated for how they react under crisis situations, the psychological weaknesses, the neurotic guilts, the sort of horrifying images that produce fears in members, and which will then be played on in the media and subtly exploited on the unconscious levels in government and other Rockefeller propaganda. For example, the fear of white middle-income teachers of attack from black gang youth, the points at which members crack under stress, the methods to make them hysterically panic, at what point members will stop trusting each other, their intimidation by violence, what vicious outside pressure will make them cave in, and etc. As many as 100 or 200 studies on every union are done by Rockefeller Labor Institute. The methodology employed came straight out of a behavior theory of labor negotiations written by Walton and McKinsey for the Rockefeller-created Cornell School of Industrial Relations. First step. The union is provoked by a low and insulting contract offer. The angry union comes out in mass to picket lines. Clenched fists and determined, stern faces are everywhere. Rockefeller waits out for the first few days. By afternoon of the third day, the union leader is spending most of his time in the union hall chatting with his friends. By the afternoon of the fourth day, the shouts are not half as energetic and they dwindle. Any faces are holding stern and determined as looking as the first morning. Tavistock enters the scene. The strike is to be crushed in stages. The union leadership is called into negotiations. Complete psychological profiles have been done on the personality structure of the union leaders. In meetings, structured like a group therapy session, unknown to the union leaders, the behavioral modifier arbiter conducts psychological probes against the union leaders. Most union leaders are people that can be easily manipulated. The negotiators and the capitalists know that the pressure of a media attack, the tensions of the strike, the pressure from rank and file, and the expiring strike fund are operating on the leaders, making them eternally wrecked. Then the leader is brought in for further negotiations. At this point, they are close to begging for anything to take back membership. But instead of better conditions for better workers, the union leaders are shown the techniques to sell it to the membership so that they won't think they are being cheated. How is this done? The union leaders and the shop stewards are given a course on negotiations at the nearby Labor Institute, Rockefeller funded. Here, behavior modification is performed. Guess who runs the seminars? You guessed it, loyal Rockefeller psychologists and their staff members. However, the union penetration and eventual takeover doesn't end there. Key agents, behavior modifiers, are placed into union positions, usually in the posts of educational secretary and attorney. By the next contract negotiation session, the union leaders are more easily malleable and will often agree to contracts in pre-contract negotiation therapy sessions. Furthermore, attention is simultaneously turned to the membership. Psychological warfare techniques such as cooling off periods between negotiations, smear campaigns in the media, offers of conciliation are used, and objective forces Rockefeller has had at his disposal to break the remaining will of strikers to crush them. Now, as somebody who is directly involved with unions, what say you?
I was saying a lot of that shit probably goes down on the East Coast because the Trilateral Commission back in the day had that kind of power. For me, growing up in
have you seen any of these techniques used?
Nah, not the big ones. Not where the education. Now,
what about these psychological group session therapy things that are all basically mind control, psychic steering things?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Probably the late 70s or early 80s. Remember that movie with Richard Pryor, Blue Collar? That's that shit right there, where they do all this shit to get organized.
Everything I just read is in that movie.
I know. That's what. I didn't know that's what you were going for, but that's definitely what I saw. You're asking what I'm seeing now. I got to start from my childhood. You got to remember, my mom went on strike every 3 years, and the strike fund wasn't the issue. But if I tell you something, so if you cross a picket line, what do you think they do to you? I'm talking about. She belongs to almost like the same union.
Yeah, it's intimidation.
No. Nah. If you cross the picket line and you go to work, they would sue you for all your wages.
Yeah. So that's intimidation. That's the shame and the guilt that they're trying to put on you, and they want to like break you down psychologically by attacking your income.
No, what it is that
that's exactly what that is.
No, I'm trying to tell you what it is. So you got to understand that you have people who've already made up their mind to cross the picket line when they first get hired. So one of the issues I've had, we claim we went very close to going on strike right after COVID, and we piggybacked somebody else's strike. Well, I'm lying. We went first, but then it was around the same time the port workers. Remember the ones in the Gulf? So what they did was they said, "Hey, we've been working for 2.5 years straight, showing up during COVID. Well, we've lost at least, they knew for a fact, 32,000 people have died from COVID while we were working, and you didn't give us a raise." And when they started doing that shit, we were negotiating our shit too. But back to what I was going to say is, so you have certain people who get hired who expect to be CEO. And I'm just being honest with you. Half the white boys that get hired in our union, they think that they're going to become management. So they walk in, and I'm telling them how this shit works, because I used to meet with every class of, union workers. And first, they would be whispering, "Man, if I go on strike, I'm coming into work." And I'm like, okay, cool. If you have that right. But there are consequences. They don't realize what the union does. And I learned that from my mom. My mom was like, look, there were people that crossed the picket line, but the union would sue them for their wages because you crossed the picket line. You're part of this contract. And whether you agree with it or not. Now, like you said, back then they had a big-ass strike fund. So you still got paid. You didn't get paid your full wages, but you got paid. So the thing is, you're fighting a much larger adversary. And like you said, you got motherfuckers playing both sides. You literally got Rockefellers who are donating money to all these different, how do you want to say, foundations, or the Ford Foundation, who was playing both sides to the middle. But literally nowadays, the issue you got, like, I'll say this, the most loyal employees I got when I was a union were mostly women. And that's all races, all whatever, because women, a lot of them understood that they weren't going to make it to the top. But when these white dudes get hired, they're 23, 24, they just know, hey man, I'm the CEO's nephew. Now, for the record, one of the CEO's nephews was one of my union people, and he got in trouble for certain stuff, and I got his ass out of trouble. But when this is his uncle, when his uncle passed, they fucked that nigga over. Did not care about his feelings or what, But
because the nepotism spell had been broken.
Yeah, yeah. So what like I said, most of the stuff you're talking about went on in the 80s when the unions were much more powerful, and it was necessary to corrupt the unions. Unions don't have the power that they had back in the day, but the few big unions that there are out there, my issue right now is they're neutered right now. We had a very strong leader. So I'm in the TCU union back in the day, and we had a very strong leader. He eventually retired, but his respect was everywhere. I mean, on both sides of the table, everybody dealt with him. If he showed up, and it's kind of cliche, but he was Italian, and when I first met him, he did look like the role. As he got older, he still had a lot of pull. With him, he was cool. The guy that replaced him, piece of shit. When I say sellout piece of shit, like, yeah, he was turning my union into the company that I applaud. You know what I'm saying? You got a motherfucker doing all this.
Because he was placed in there to do that.
They did. This is the problem with what you're saying, and I'm gonna tell you this: people are so quick to sell out now. The hierarchy.
That's the whole point of what I just said.
No.
That means it's easier to put plants in there to manipulate the outcome.
No, you don't have to. These niggas are volunteering, is what I was trying to say. Like the guy that replaced me as a union leader, people keep saying, "Oh, he's on the take." I'm like, that nigga's on the take. He's taking y'all money from the union, but doing what the company wants him to do sometimes. And I'm like, I get it, but nobody wants to do the hard shit. Nobody wants to get calls at 3:00 in the morning. You saw what I went through, so you understand this.
Dude, but do not think for a second that the invisible hand is no longer involved in that shit.
Oh, no. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, the invisible hand don't have to work as hard. The invisible hand ain't got to threaten your family.
That's what I'm presenting to you is the fact that this entire thing that I've been building up to is telling you that these people are doing the work for them. Yeah. Earlier, I said that they have created a type of worker that is willing to destroy themselves through overworking.
Hold it. Nobody's disagreeing with you. I'm actually agreeing with you. I'm saying these people are they're so gung ho on whatever image. Like, see, when we were kids, it was the 80s thing in the stock market, and you go to college and do this.
No, it was a trickle down economy, motherfucker. That's what that was.
No. Trickle down economics doesn't work. That's not what I'm going for. What I'm saying is that we were brainwashed to leave the trades. We were brainwashed to leave certain things, thinking like, I'm better than that. I'm a black person.
No, I brought up trickle down economics because that was sold to everybody for this fucking Republican Kool-Aid motherfuckers was drinking at the time. But we got to move on, dude, because I got to cover some more shit. So initially, the Aquarian conspiracy was a secret U.S. government project assigned to the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, and created in 1946 by the Tavistocks to study how newly created cultural and social trends affect society, such as libertarianism, left libertarianism, liberalism, socialism, anarchism, communism, materialism, all the isms, New Age, and many other basic orientations on society. Never publicly released and secretly named, the changing images of man, the Aquarian conspiracy, sprang from a policy report prepared by SRI for the study of social policy. The 319-page report was prepared by a team of 14 researchers and directed by a panel of 23 controllers, including Margaret Mead, B.F. Skinner, Irvin Laszlo of the United Nations, Sir Geoffrey Vickers of British Intelligence, and many others. The project was overseen by Professor Willis Harman, a futurist whose specialty was performing post-industrial social paradigm as a popular version of how to transform or soften up people, according to Tavistock manuals. In 1961, Aldous Huxley had a lecture in which he described the police state as the final revolution, a dictatorship without tears, where people love their servitude. He said the goal was to produce a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away, but will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing, or enhanced by pharmaceutical methods. The aim of the Stanford study is to change the desire of mankind from that of industrial progress to one that embraces spiritualism, war by nonviolent or nonlinear confrontation. The study asserts that in our present society, the image of industrial and technological man is obsolete and must be discarded. Many of our present images appear to have become dangerously obsolete. However, science, technology, and economics have been made possible by really significant strides forward, achieving such basic human goals as physical safety, security, and material comfort and better health. But many of these successes have brought with them problems of being too successful, problems that seem insoluble within the set of societal value premises that led to their emergence. Our highly developed social system and technology leads to higher vulnerability and breakdowns. Indeed, the range and interconnected impact of societal problems that are now emerging pose a serious threat to our civilization. If our predictions of the future prove correct, they said, we can expect the association problems of the trend to become more serious and more universal and to occur more rapidly. This is predictive programming. Therefore, the SRI study concludes, we must change the industrial technological image of man fast. Analysis of the nature of contemporary societal problems leads to the conclusion that the images of man that dominated the last 2 centuries will be inadequate for post-industrial eras. The report concludes with the following set of predictions. There are numerous indications that a new anticipatory image of mankind may be emerging. Number 1, youth involvement in political processes. Number 2, women's liberation movement. Number 3, youth rebellion against societal wrongs. 4, emerging interest in societal responsibilities of business. 5, the generation gap implying a changing paradigm. Number 6, the anti-technological bias of many young people. 7, experimentation with new family structures and interpersonal relationships. 8, the emergence of communes as alternative lifestyles. 9, the emergence of conservative ecology movement. Number 10, a surge in the interest in Eastern religions and philosophical perspectives. Number 11, a renewed interest in fundamentalist Christianity. Number 12, labor union concerns with the quality of work environment. 13, an increasing interest in meditation and other spiritual disciplines. 14, the increasing importance of self-realization processes. These disparate trends do not, when taken individually, signify the emergence of a new image of human being. Yet, when they are considered collectively, they suggest substantial societal stirrings which may eventually emerge into a new and guiding image. Thus softened up, the United States was now deemed ripe for the introduction of drugs, especially cocaine, crack cocaine, and heroin, to rival the Prohibition era in scope and huge amounts of money to be made. This, too, was an integral part of the Aquarian conspiracy. The proliferation of drug usage was one of the subjects under the study at the Science Policy Research Unit at Tavistock. It was known as the Future Shocks Center, a title given to so-called future-oriented psychology designed to manipulate whole population groups to induce future shocks. This far-reaching initiative for silent weapon technology was first discussed and put into action as an official doctrine by the Policy Committee of the Bilderberg Group at the inaugural meeting in 1954. They used the term Quiet War, World War III, to describe the overt tactical methodology to subjugate the human race. The document, titled Top Secret, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, An introductory programming manual was uncovered by accident July 7, 1986, when an employee of Boeing Aircraft purchased a surplus IBM copier for scrap parts at a sale and discovered inside details of a plan hatched in the early days of the Cold War. This manual of strategies called for control of the masses through manipulation of industry, people's pastimes, education, political leanings. It called for a quiet revolution, pitting brother against brother to divert the public's attention from what was really going on.
We always focus on how it's hard to believe that it was connected, but one of the things that we deal with on a daily basis for mind control is the blue screen. It was decided in the 80s that these computer screens would be blue on purpose because it was indicative of mind control. What makes people more malleable? Literally, you need red light makes you normal, but this blue light that comes from our cell phones, comes from our TV screens, and comes from our computer screens is something that is used to control us. So, back to what you were saying, is there are so many different ways that they're trying to control you. They try to convince you to become a part of all these different crazy movements, not because they want you to succeed, because they want to separate you from each other. Well, there's something that you said that I'm trying to think about. I want to say it correctly, but people really think they're individuals when they're being coached in certain directions, and that's where we are right now. Everybody, look, man, we fucked. This mind control thing is in so many different places. They either get you with mind control, get you with drugs, get you with all these different things, and they control you. And now you have different desires, different needs. It broke down how the fact that it wants to work you to death. Everybody wants to use AI for no reason other than the fact it eliminates jobs and it eliminates your ability to perform at the highest level because you can't keep up with the new goals, all this shit. So, yeah, I agree. That's some fucked up shit. What we going to do about it?
Say no. Use their own campaigns against them. Just say no. Like, this is the thing. You know, a lot of these Rockefeller manipulation techniques, they were selling cooperation and participation. Don't participate. Don't opt in. Do not be part of any of these new things that they're offering to you. Matter of fact, opt out of a lot of stuff that you're in that is of no use to you.
That's what we were talking about, the Trilateral Commission. We grew up on the Trilateral. These movements or things or organizations, like they might change the name, but the goal is the same. But back when in the 80s, it was a Trilateral Commission. The Rockefeller, Carnegie's, Ford Foundation, the Trilateral was Japan, England, and America. Just because they changed the name doesn't mean they changed the desired outcome and how they manipulate us. That might change a little bit, but how about this? One of the ways they get us, especially they always practice on us first, but that recategorization shit. Like, I'm gonna give an example. This has driven me crazy for years. All these black folks, which we got Native American in us, but when they recategorize you, you will argue over the wrong point. How many of these black people who are who were considered freemen? So you have the Dawes Rolls. You have these three brothers that went through and categorized all the Native Americans. And if you were too dark, they said you were slaves. Now, mind you, as we look at history, we realize that us black folks were Native American, we were Indian. But what the Dawes guys did, the three brothers, they went and looked at the Cherokee. If you was too dark, they said that you was their slave. But that's not my point. My point is you got people right now arguing over them being freemen. You're arguing over being slaves when the DNA says you weren't slaves. That's this recategorization of people is a big deal. This is how they get you. This is how they make you fight each other for no reason. This is how they make you recategorize yourself and want different goals. I'm Roscoe always talks about the first adopter thing, where everybody wants to be first to some technology. He just sat there and said, my brother, just sat there and said, like, look, don't adopt this new shit. At least see how it works, see what it is. But What the point I'm making is they've been recategorizing people for years. When the Spanish and the French got here and the English got here, it was clear who the Native Americans were. The East Coast Native Americans are black. Midwest ones look a little bit different. West Coast look a little bit different. But the thing is, when you recategorize them from Indian to Negro to mulatto to whatever, then they're no longer a threat to you because they're arguing over semantics. They're arguing over words. And while they're arguing over words, you're taking a motherfucking land. You're taking all their resources. Well, that's the same thing that's going on right now. They'll recategorize. Remember when we were kids, there was WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And they were the conservatives. And I remember Saturday Night Live had an episode where the WASP were fighting the killer bees. That shit. So now they're not called WASP, now they're called MAGA. And so when you change somebody's name, all of a sudden they want to either identify with it or they don't. And while they're arguing over whether that's them or not, you're doing a shell game and taking away all their rights, all their powers, making them vote against their actual well-being. That shit. So yeah, this classification shit, yeah, and the pre-programming is part of it because you put this in a little nigga's head when he's a kid. Like you want to fight over some shit, that kind of stuff. And so we create these situations. We create warriors without wars, and then we give them the war later on, and they'll fight to the death over some bullshit. Remember 2 years ago, the V8 is going away. They're only using V6s and turbos and shit. Now all of a sudden we got a different president. Hey man, shit, bring back the V8, Chrysler Ram, which we don't care for the Dodge brothers, but that's another conversation. But we fight over everything and we don't accomplish shit, and we don't actually go at the people who are really fucking you over, taking your land, your ability. And sometimes your land ain't just physical land as in real estate. Sometimes your land is mental real estate. Sometimes your land is, we fight over Facebook even though we don't own that shit at all. That's what I'm talking about, is that shit, we stay reclassifying ourselves, and our enemy is strong, and they stay the same, and they know what they're doing, and they give you shit. And the Comstock was inventing shit back in the day. Yeah, this shit's been around for years.
But see, this conversation started between you and I talking about how the Bible was the earliest form of predictive programming. Because if you wanted to basically bring about a end result, you need to create the narrative first. And then you need to create a cult around people who would be, willing to fight and die for this and kill other people for it and do whatever it takes to bring about this end result, whether it's real or not. But all of it is basically a narrative that's driven by a person, then a group of people. It always starts with one guy.
It can start with several or one, don't make a difference. The issue is if the Bible's presented to you in the wrong order, which it is, you have a whole different outlook on the world and who's in charge and what you want.
Right, but on the most elemental level, you should be questioning whether what you're doing, how you conduct yourself, your belief system, what your foundation of your core beliefs are. Is it serving you and your family in the best way? Or is it really serving somebody else who doesn't have your best interest in mind?
Look, when you recategorize somebody and you make a race of people that have been around for 1,200 years take the place of people who have been around for 200,000 years, all of a sudden you think these people are special, and they're not. They're recessive. They don't have any of the traits that would make them special. And the other part that you must understand is that how are these people married to all these politicians and their kin?
That's infiltration.
Yeah. But, so yes, that's where I was going.
And they put themselves in the right places so they can be in these influential power centers, so they can steer everything in towards the direction that they want to go in. Look, it's all manipulation. It goes back to the show that we were talking about pro wrestling. It's all manipulation, and the whole thing is that the reason why we record these episodes for you to think about, to listen to ponder these things so that you can make these changes in your own life.
Now, don't leave out the fact that when we started these conversations, and we would have conversations, and a year later or 6 months later, everybody would be talking about the stuff that we were talking. We were recording this to show that we were right and that we were looking at the same things. I got homeboys, and I know you do too, and homegirls too, that we talk about shit. Then like 5 years later, duct tape told me about that, or like he was right. How many of those do you get? Like, hey, man, Roscoe was right again.
It happens. It happens a lot. But look, predictive programming. Be on the lookout for it. Don't get played. That's all I got. We out. Peace.
Yo, holla back.